Working women are especially being affected by the lockdown with new responsibilities at home. Are South African employers sufficiently receptive to the additional burden of family responsibility that has been introduced during this lockdown? Fiona Leppan, a director at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr Employment Practice, joins us now to talk about this a little bit more. Fiona, good evening and thank you for your time tonight. Between February and April 2020, twice as many jobs were lost by women than by men. What are the factors at play?
Thabo, this is a very important question that you pose, because the fallback position with the working woman is that when she's working remotely and working from home, she's taking on a lot more responsibility, as we've seen with schools closed, etc. The training, the teaching of children, the domestic duties that need to be carried out in the household fall on her shoulders. And when an employer believes that it's not getting full productivity from the female employee, you suddenly find they can be the casualties in any restructuring process. It leads me to a particular English survey conducted by the Institute of Fiscal Studies at the University College of London, which demonstrated how the working woman in the home environment is suddenly at a great disadvantage. She's working up to 2 hours less per day because of these other duties she has to fulfill. And that's been brought about by the COVID pandemic, and they're put at a disadvantage as a result.
For many employers, the idea of working from home does seem to, play in their mind as you're working more relaxed hours, flexi time. You can adjust your work hours as per what you require, and therefore they do not take it as a strain, particularly on the working parents. You want to raise awareness to them to this. How receptive are they to that concept of saying, actually, it does put more strain on the working mother?
In the many instances that I have been analyzing recently, I found that the working woman who's at home and expected to carry out her duties is expected to be at the beck and call of the employer at all hours. So suddenly your working day kicks off, maybe 6:30, 7 in the morning. You may still be detained on meetings into the evening because you're expected to be available. And one doesn't have a difficulty with that level of flexibility. Far from it, it can suit many women. But I do think that employers need to be careful that they don't exploit that situation.
Right, and how do they tread that particular space carefully? Because nobody really planned for this disruption of COVID-19. Nobody knew how the new normal was going to look like, and many places of employment do not have plans in place or models in place as to how we're going to carry this one out.
I think that the need is for employers to make sure that meeting requests are able to be scheduled at times that would suit persons, that they consult about that. There's no reason why they couldn't and shouldn't do so. That level of flexibility exists to make sure that the working mother in that situation is still able to be productive. Because what I noticed in one example is schedules were sent out to employees. Plot exactly what are you doing at home, how many hours are you spending on what, and came back and said, well, this is only 6 productive hours, why am I paying for a full day's work? But the 6 productive hours might actually be quantitatively what the employer needs to get that job done, in which case whether it took the person 6 hours or 8 hours, the particular targets are being met. But I'm not sure that that was fully understood. It seemed to be if you're not able to account for 8 hours or 9 hours at your desk, that you were in some way slacking off, which wasn't the case at all in several of the examples that I looked into.
No. Fiona, now you believe further that actually the domestic work ratio is likely to get even further skewed with the increased prevalence of working from home. Why?
I think that it will skew simply because of the responsibilities that are at play. And here, if you have the latitude to have help with some of the duties you need to carry out, it can, of course, free up your day that much more easily. Or where the children have left home because they might be in tertiary education or they've already entered the workplace. I think these are issues that employers tend to overlook. They see the woman at home, she's got her domestic duties, but regardless of that, she just has to carry on regardless. And I think the flexibility, as I've said, plays a role. For some women, it's useful because they're not traveling to get to work, not sitting in traffic jams, going home. But at the same time, I do think a balance needs to be achieved.
You're putting this up against what men do as far as prioritizing their work more, and you're saying we'll find ourselves in a situation where, again, this will certainly hamper the future professional prospects of mothers in the workplace.
Yes, it has that. It certainly does. There needs to be a recalibration within the family unit as to who's doing what tasks, how they need to be carried out, the teaching of children, their homework, their day-to-day activities where they're not at school full time. This has to be worked out on an equitable basis. And I think men do try to play that role more than perhaps they did years ago. But at the same time, where the husband sees himself as the provider in that household, he's going to say, my time comes first in terms of what I need to do to put the bread on the table.
You're recommending expanding the child care support for working parents. You mentioned that earlier on. In countries where this has been tested, what has been the results?
So it's been quite interesting, some of these studies, and indeed there are examples for example, in Costa Rica, the United Nations, in one of their surveys, reported that they have provided reduced interest rates, credit to cooperatives and business projects which are targeted at women, getting them into workplace situations, into productive work. Why? To alleviate poverty, to obviously assist in that regard. And of course, I think that's important beyond just women, in fact, but also youth, so very important in the South African context.
So are you suggesting then, Fiona, if I'm hearing you clearly, that ultimately there should be expanded childcare support given to parents working from home and the employer should fit the bill? Literally, ultimately, they must absorb that new financial stress that will then come with getting somebody to come and help you.
In New Zealand, for example, that's not placed at the door of the employer. It's a social grant. They call it the family package. And it's really to, if you like, put a price on this invisible work that families have to do just to keep themselves in a position where they can offer their services to the employer. And I'm saying that's all very well and good, but we don't have that elastic in South Africa. And always to put it at the doorstep of the employer can be extremely difficult. Our economy is under such strain. I think that our Department of Employment and Labour has gone to great extent to make funds available to households losing money during this COVID period through the COVID TERS benefit scheme. But that has a finite end when the state of disaster comes to an end. So we have to be careful on that front because the funds are not going to be there to support that type of need going forward. But it's certainly something to look at where we can.
Now, as far as leniency is concerned, particularly by local businesses and employers on this added pressure that mothers are particularly taking, what level of leniency are you talking about?
What level of, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You're saying
okay.
They should be showing some leniency to working parents, especially mothers.
Yes, I think the leniency I talk to is not measuring on just hours that are dedicated to the task at hand, but look at the quality of work being produced. Look at the outcome that's being produced, because that's going to dictate the value of having the woman working from home to try and adjust to this. Remember that COVID was foisted upon us with almost no notice. And although there was talk, and certainly many companies were moving towards trying this system out of working from home, it wasn't obviously something that was embedded in policy or procedure within the employer's working environment. And I think that's been the challenge. And we need to work on that.
Do you think that will be something...
To find the bounds of that leniency.
But do you think we'll be able to sustain this working from home approach going forward, even post, I suppose, COVID-19?
If the productivity is there, yes. I can give you an example from my own perspective. I'm running a full legal practice from my dining room table without any interruption. I've been extremely fortunate in terms of workflow, but I'm able to do it. Maybe it's because I also have the advantage of an outstanding household that's assisting me, that's supporting me, and I have outstanding domestic help. Not every family would necessarily have the ability to pay for that.
Fiona, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us tonight. Fiona Leppan, Director of Cliff Decker Hofmeyr Employment Practice, suggesting maybe even a grant or an allowance that employers should give mothers working from home so they can get an additional extra child care support. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next.